Welcome back to another book review, guys. And as you could see by the thumbnail today, we are tackling Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us. This is part one of a part two series, not only of this book, but of this video series, because over the weekend, I read both. I read It Ends With Us, and I was so excited. I read It Starts With Us. What's that mean? Must mean that I like the book, okay? If you guys watched my last video, I covered Verity, where I rated it a 6.5 out of 10, which I feel now is a little unfair. I feel that's a little unfair now. I judged Colleen Hoover too harshly on a genre that she does not usually write in. I didn't learn that until afterwards. Colleen Hoover, I'm sorry. You did a great job. Verity was a good read. Very dark. Go watch that video if you want to see that review. It Ends With Us. Guys, this book, I'm giving all the spoilers, telling the story, telling how I liked it. I want you guys to talk to me in the comments about how you liked it. This is a romance novel. This is not your typical, like, Nicholas Sparks romance novel. Colleen Hoover will take things dark. Warning, we're talking about domestic violence. Seems to be all the topics. I just made a video about Dana White. Unfortunately, domestic violence issue with his wife. Anyway, Colleen Hoover, It Ends With Us. Our main character, Lily Bloom. Sub-main character, Atlas Kerrigan? Atlas Kerrigan. Sub-main character, Ryle, who my eyes read as Kyle for like 90% of the book. Then you have Ryle's sister, Alyssa, her husband, Marshall, who is also Ryle's best friend. And we have Lily's parents. We have Atlas's parents. So let's get into the book. The book begins. Lily Bloom is taking some time for herself on a rooftop when suddenly Ryle enters and starts to destroy a chair that's on the roof. They end up talking. He's very aggressive with his, I want to, get with you. I'm trying to hook up with you. He says, I don't do relationships. I only do, one night flings. And if you let me, it'll be a good time. It dissolves. They leave. They go elsewhere. She ends up, Lily, opens a floral shop where suddenly a girl just happens to wander in, and in comes Alyssa, her best friend, who is also Ryle's sister. She hires Alyssa. They begin to work together, and somehow, I forget how it works, she brings up the fact that she used to write in this journal. She used to write stories to Ellen DeGeneres. She used to love watching the Ellen show, and this is something she kind of like starts to pull the story together. So she brings out this journal where she starts to tell the story of her first time, and the first time you hear about like what the book is basing around. She says her first time being with someone. She brings this up during her first interaction with Ryle on the roof. She talks about how her first time was with a homeless man, and you're like, wait, what the fuck? So then she goes into the journal where she's writing to Ellen DeGeneres, which is funny enough. The very first book, one of the first books I ever read was Ellen DeGeneres' book that's mentioned in this book when I was grounded in middle school. So just a fun fact. She starts writing to Ellen and telling all her deepest thoughts. So anyway, she finds one night that there is a young man living in the abandoned house across from her backyard. This is Atlas. She begins to help him. She brings him food. She like hangs out with him a little bit, and obviously they become friends. So you have to pay attention because the book is constantly jumping back and forth. Colleen Hoover likes to do that. A lot of these authors today like to have multiple stories going or multiple timelines going at once. It reminds me a lot of The Wish by Nicholas Sparks, but that's for another book. So they start to, as Lily is catching you up on her life and where she is now in this odd encounter with this guy, and now she meets Alyssa not knowing it's Ryle's sister. They end up at a lunch together where Ryle is there. Some sparks start to, fly off. Well, then, just as you're reading the journal and you're finding out who Atlas is, you're finding out she falls in love with Atlas. They have, there's a moment where he's sick. She has to take care of him. And then Atlas leaves for Boston. So you know that They make love for the first time. She's in love with him. But she knows it's best because he's homeless. He says, I'm going to go live with my uncle in Boston. So he leaves. Life goes on for both of them. They and Lily and Alyssa and Ryle all end up at this lunch together where it's kind of the first time Ryle and Lily are going to figure out, are they going to, figure things out? And in comes Atlas. Lily thinks he's a server. Push comes to shove. There's another... I'm getting ahead of myself. So there's this dinner. Lily is now in turmoil because she doesn't know, is she going to start this new thing with Ryle? Is she going to pick things up with Atlas? Then the decision is made pretty clear for her. Ryle, who is this passionate, romantic guy that, he fell out of when they first started talking, I don't do relationships, I only want to fuck you, I just want a one-night stand, to he starts being overly aggressive with Lily. He starts showing up places. He starts saying, like, all I can think about is fucking you. If you just let me do it once, I promise I'll never bother you again. And there's these, like, super aggressive moments that he has where he's not really giving her the option. He's saying, like, this is what I need to happen. And she's kind of almost in a mercy play, but she is also very attracted to his passion. She's, interested in this vibe. As a male with domestic violence in my family, it's concerning to me when I read books like these, the 50 Shades of Greys, when I watch the overly dominant, kind of shit, the aggressive type stuff. You kind of almost know that domestic violence is going to be peeking its head right around the corner. And here it comes, because Ryle hurts Lily. I don't remember the necessary... how it went. I remember there was one, he pushed her, then there was another, he threw her down a flight of stairs, and then there was the final one where there was an altercation in the house, and he ends up trying to sexually assault her, and he falls asleep. She exits, and I'm missing a lot of things, because every time Lily and Ryle fight, it's about Atlas. So Ryle finds, after the first time they see each other again in the restaurant. Lily has like a cut on her eye or a bruise on her eye. Atlas sees it. I'm forgetting one of the most important things. Lily's dad was abusive to her mom growing up. Atlas knew this. Atlas' parents abandoned him, made him move out, and that's why he was homeless. So they bonded over family trauma, domestic violence, and it not being okay. When they were kids, Lily's dad was attempting to sexually assault her mother, and Atlas stopped Lily from essentially almost stabbing her father, and he wasn't even supposed to be in the house at the time. Like, the mom saw him save her, and it was like this big thing. So the book is very like back and forth. Well, then when the abuse happens, it starts to shift the story back in the direction in which you originally wanted it, which is Lily and Atlas. So after the first, he sees the bruise under Lily's eye, he attacks Ryle in the restaurant, which then you learn it's Atlas's restaurant. He's a chef, and they've been in Atlas's restaurant this whole time. So then Lily finds this out, tries to tell, hey, we can't go back there. Obviously, she still hasn't told Ryle who Atlas is. That's coming. Another fight happens. After he sees this, the fight happened because Lily and Atlas walk out of the bathroom together. After he's like, what happened? What happened to your eye? And he took his phone number and put it in between her cell phone case and her cell phone. Ryle finds that later. That's how the second fight happens. So after the second fight happens, Lily calls Atlas. She goes and stays with Atlas. He takes her to the hospital. Lily finds out she's pregnant. Complicated. Alyssa is also still working for Lily this whole time. Lily is not telling Alyssa necessarily what happened with her brother, and they are staying good friends but trying to navigate what's going to happen next. Eventually, Lily does tell Alyssa. Alyssa is supportive, says you need to leave him, but also manages to be supportive of her brother at the same time, is saying, what he did was wrong, but he's still my brother, and I'm going to love him, but I don't support him and you guys being together, which I thought was toxic. I thought that was a little toxic, and we'll get to that, and It Starts With Us. So push comes to shove, literally. The book ends, it ends with us, ends with the child being born. Atlas and Lily have been speaking casually since the day the baby was born. Emerson, you'll find later. Lily tells Ryle finally that she wants a divorce. Upon leaving the hospital, she has another run-in with Atlas, and they agree to just keep in touch. And that is how this book ends. Let's get into the more complicated parts of it. The domestic violence part I thought was important. I thought this part of the book was super important because what you saw in this book was a domestic violence victim navigating the waters after violence, after the violence had happened to them, and how they had to deal with, and I thought this was so important, being intertwined in a positive way with their abuser's family. Because most of the time that is the case. There is a person who sees themselves as the abuser's sibling's other sibling, right? So like if my brother is abusing someone or is abusing his spouse, that spouse would usually see me as like their brother. So we would be pretty close. Usually, not always, but you see what I'm saying. There's oftentimes in an abusive relationship, there is that dynamic that connects them all the way back, right? Navigating that is so weird from personal experience, and in this book, it's weird. It makes you uncomfortable to read from Alyssa's standpoint because when you see Alyssa, she is allowing the abuse. She's not calling the police. She's not shunning her brother. She's not making her brother, pay for his consequences in any way. And she's also remaining to be friends with Lily. It's complicated because it's hard to play both sides of that loyalty fence. It puts people in very weird positions because what do you do if the victim doesn't want to file charges against their abuser? Everyone has to move on with their life. Everyone has to decide, especially if a baby's going to be involved, how is everyone going to navigate this? And I thought it did a really good job of documenting the struggle that a domestic violence victim goes through. I dated someone who was abused by their previous partner. They had a child together, and the moments of intense anxiety, tension, and things that would come up for them when it was time to do like child visitations or even conversate about things like that, he always would try to navigate situations so they would be alone together, so that way he could raise his voice, he could intimidate her, he could, abuse her eventually. And it got to the point where he had gotten so ingrained in her family that they all did whatever he said just to appease him, so they could appease this idea that their child that got pregnant young was in this happy relationship. They looked at it as, every relationship has issues, and sometimes people get mad, and, well, what did you do to make him that mad? And it turns into that. And I think that is the most important thing that young women can know today. It's never okay. It's never okay. It's never okay to accept an apology for domestic violence. The second a man raises his hand to you, you leave. Men, same thing. Second a woman raises her hand to you and strikes you, you leave. It's over. It's done. What decisions you make after that are made between you, your family, and any legal representation if you so choose to get some. I'm getting ahead of myself. There will be a part 2 of this. As soon as I end this video, there will be part 2 for It Starts With Us, where we will get into more of dealing with the abusers and life after abuse, which... Let me first rate It Ends With Us. This book is getting a 10 out of 10. I think its message is important. I think it was very well written. I think it was tactfully written, given the sensitive nature of the book. I give this a 10 out of 10. And obvious, I don't think that was much of a secret since I went and immediately not only bought, but read the sequel, which is, I guess, kind of a prequel as well, because it just continues on, but it also gives context to everything else. It's a crazy thing. Check out the next video. We'll see.